Hello, my name is Maya Sanchez, and this is my project-based learning for education. So first, we'll be starting off with providing a definition of what is project-based learning. And even though we are focusing on chapters 3 to 5, chapter 1 gives a good overall definition of what even is project-based learning. And it says, quote, "It is about students investigating open-ended questions and applying their knowledge to produce authentic products or original solutions." And this was from page 7. So now with a refresher, or at least a better idea of what project-based learning, let's connect them with the chapters. So again, this is going to be for chapters 3, 4, and 5. Starting with chapter 3, we're going to be talking about imagining the possibilities. Then in chapter 4, we're going to be talking about strategies for discovery. And then chapter 5, making assessment meaningful. So now going back, we're going to start with our first chapter, chapter 3, imagining the possibilities. And in the beginning of this chapter, they provide an illustration that I really liked, and I feel like it really does well of a good introduction for the chapter and what is it that they're trying to say. So the illustration goes how just like when preparing for a trip, you will want to visualize the final destination, the items you think you need, the places you want to see, etc., etc. All the planning is first thought through before putting into action to create an overall idea of what you will need in your journey. So this is meant to be of, similarly as teachers, we want to visualize the type of lesson and what objective it will fulfill for the teachers to progress. So what does it include? So things that are included is needing to think of what is the big idea. So like the trip, a main objective of what students should learn by the end of the lesson should be known. So first, as teachers, is the importance of knowing what is it that I want my students to learn and capture their attention into wanting to learn more so they can better understand the concept. And then afterwards, we're going to pass it back onto the students so they can further develop the lesson, going beyond just surface thinking, going more deeper, going more in depth. And instead, considering more of the impact that will have on others, the effect, how will it intermingle the lesson into everyday life, making it more practical and reflective for students. And a resource example that was provided in the book and as well as from firsthand experience in this class is using wikis. And they're a really great use of having students express their thoughts and more in depth of what the lesson taught. It also allows them to interact with their peers. Sometimes we would comment on each other's wikis, or sometimes we could read other students with their thoughts. And this encouraged communication, teamwork, and collaboration with others to get to know their thoughts, new ideas, and maybe even parts of the lessons that previously others haven't thought of. So this also helps with developing digital age literacy. So this is part of the results. So besides knowing what this big idea that students should comprehend, there are skills attached to them that help them in the future, other projects, and in their life as in adulthood. With technology proving how much more important and prominent it is going to be in our life, it's only right really to also include it in education as a positive aspect. And in the book, they mention about applying Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives for students to achieve. And this is meant to help them to develop their critical thinking skills, to be well equipped for assignments for in the future. And I listed them on the left side, and those are to remember what they're being taught, or at least the big idea, to understand the concept, to learn how to apply that into everyday life, or how is it that they can apply that regardless of the future they're going to take, further analyzing it, so going deeper, evaluate the entire concept, and then create. So then they'll create it on their own, or they'll apply it and make it. And by incorporating different tools to students, this will help strengthen their learning capabilities, which will also help them learn 6 new traits that will help them in both school and as an adult, regardless of the path they take, because they are just valuable skill sets needed. And these 6 learning functions include, first, research, which is knowing how to determine information that is educational, applicable for the assignment, and this requires a lot of higher level thinking needed. The second is make ideas visible and express ideas creatively. There you go. From the research made from their own, so from the research students have gathered on their own, to when meeting others, they can see from a new perspective what they didn't think before. Especially with technology, it can bring new discussions and present them differently. Collaboration, that's important, so you know how to work for others and work with others, manage different personalities and different ideas. Project management, this helps practice the good habit of organization on obtaining information, especially for a project or a paper. Then there's reflection and iteration. It makes the lesson more in-depth for personal remembrance. Reflections using wikis or blogs, personalizing it. Supported study or enrichment using open educational resources is our last one. And this is to use textbooks and other resources as assistance to help understand parts of the lessons they may not have previously gotten. This is just to help them further understand it, but as a teacher, the job is to present the big idea. So now we're going to be moving to chapter 4, which is strategies for discovery. So after developing a project, so we had just previously talked about compelling this big idea of what this main project is going to be about. So it's presented. That doesn't mean that after that's made that it's done. Instead, to make sure that it is the top quality, it's important to review and look over it. And there are various things that makes a project good, but to address a few of the main points, just as like a few of the ones listed. One of them is impact various learners. So make sure that it's applicable for various types of learners. It broadly applies to them for different directions, regardless what they take in the future. Like mentioned previously, it needs to be applicable for students to apply to themselves. This also helps because there's various tools used to that, both online and in person. We have seen so many resources, whether not just lecture types, it could be more personal. So there's so much more accessibility for that. Also, like mentioned previously, have a big idea, so it makes it understandable to learn about, yet still slightly challenging, and have students think outside the box to think critically. Next is to think realistic, and create an interaction between teacher and student rather than just lecture-based, and helping students to reflect on what stood out for them. And then again, using the 6 different essential learning functions that we just mentioned before. So these are strategies mentioned to provide a good presentation, but there's also flaws, and these flaws are called pitfalls. And even though there's not a specific definition of what a pitfall is, but the overall meaning is projects that have shortcoming or limitations for students to really progress or actually benefit in learning of the lesson. So some of these examples of pitfalls to avoid is 1, long project. So it's more of busy work than having actual academic benefits. Next is too flashy with too little value. Having an extremely techie project but little education value. Sometimes, we're enticed with something that's new and shiny, and it seems better. The book really explains this concept really well. It says to go beyond, quote, window dressing or focusing only on projects that seems only aesthetically pleasing to the eye is like a beautiful present. So that it's only decorated very nicely, only to reveal that there's really nothing much value. Instead, consideration of what the learning results should be more important, and connection it has with the students is the main objective. And then lastly, it shouldn't be too scripted and not feel authentic. So if it feels unnatural, it limits students to branch out and become curious, and it makes them feel that they should just have their project as identical because the example is not being set. And also a note that the book mentions is that there isn't just a one-stop area where this is where you can only get your ideas. It can come from various places, and it's best if it's based within the community so it's more specific and relevant for the students. So this includes current world events, community, specific queries, other teachers' project plans, and so much more. Lastly, we have chapter 5, which is making assessment meaningful. And this is talking about how to make the work purposeful for the students. This is done by using assessment, which we'll be talking about the two mentioned and the examples and differences they have amidst each other. So the first type of assessment is summative assessment. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And the definition provided is reviewing the students' learning results after the end of the project. So an example of this is a rubric or a test, and some schools have specific assessments or rubrics already available, but the book provides examples saying that if a rubric is not available, then it can be built from scratch, as long as it is judging students on realistic standards and keeping in mind the three big categories: knowledge, skills, process, and dispositions. Then lastly, the second assessment is formative assessment, which is teachers assessing students as they are working on the assignment. So unlike summative assessment, this is reviewing the lesson towards the end. Formative assessment is reviewing the assignment as they're working on it. So it's not waiting towards the end. And there's a quote here that this type of assessment, what it helps is, quote, tap into students' thinking so you can adjust the project, adjust misunderstandings, or guide effort in new directions. And this was in page 113. So it's more specific, it's more personal, it's meant for that student rather than generalized. And you can help them right there and then. And even though example of this type of assessment in PBL form is not specified, there are examples that can range from that, such as short quizzes to a reflection assignment. Criteria to keep in mind is to not make them so formal, have it more comfortable, casual, have milestones and check-ins to help the students and check in to make sure that they're doing well. They could observe their peers, have inspiration, collaborate, and receive guidance throughout time. So this chapter finalizes by providing various examples that can be used as a tool when it comes to assessing, regardless of the type of assessing. I picked 3 that I personally liked. One was checklists, which that can help students see their current working status on the assignment and remain on task. The second is coffee talk, which coffee talks are listed under various names, but the overall concept is just to be like a casual talk for a teacher to supervise and assist a small group of students in their research. There's encouraging collaboration among students, peers, and to think further critically on a topic. And then lastly, portfolio. I am a bit biased because I consider this in an art aspect, but it doesn't have to be limited to just that. But it provides a visual or an in-depth reflection of the student's progress and evolution of their work within the class. So they can see how they've grown, they changed, what they've done, adjustments they made, what other adjustments they need to make. And real quick, what's great about these options is that even though they are also versatile in being capable of being accessed at both in person and digitally. So it's not that it can only be for classes in person or only an online class. It can be for either. So these are my works cited of the book.